Let's go ahead and welcome in Congressman Greg Steube. He just helped to pass a bill, a bipartisan bill at that, the Protection of Women's Sports Act.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Congressman. How are you today?
Good.
Are you also in the Kai Trump fan club, I have to ask?
Well, you gave me a lot more information than I knew about her, but now I definitely am. I'll have to, as you were reading through her stats, I was like, man, she's got like 10 times more followers on Twitter than I do. So I got to check out what's going on.
Yeah, no, she's an incredible young woman, obviously comes from an incredible family. We all know that to be the truth. Let's talk about the bipartisan bill that you helped to get passed. This is something we all know needed to happen. Finally, we're seeing some traction in the area. It's the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. It ensures that only biological females compete against other biological females in women's sports programs operated, sponsored, or facilitated by recipients of federal funding. Before we get to your reaction right now, let's listen to your reaction to the bill getting passed on Capitol Hill from earlier this week.
This is the type of thing that even moderate, independent women are appalled that their daughters are actually in locker rooms with biological men. And it polls overwhelmingly popular that we want to have and protect women's sports. Yet the Democrats have for years tried to allow biological women to compete in our nation's women's collegiate activities. And they'll say to you, and they said it on the floor in the debate that we just had, this never happens. I had a constituent, Emma Wyan, who was refused a title in a swimming Olympic competition because of a male athlete who used to compete in men's swimming and then decided he wanted to identify as a woman, and he was allowed to do that. It's just what Riley said. It's absolutely absurd that we have to actually pass a bill that says only women can be in women's sports. But I've been honored to be in part of the fight. I'm honored that we actually got it done today in a bipartisan fashion.
Yeah, Congressman, it is absolutely absurd that we even have to be speaking like this, that we even have to have a bill that protects women in the areas that it is. But at least, I mean, listen, we got to see the bright side in things, right? I mean, there's so much insanity going on in the world these days. We take small wins. One of the small wins with this being that you are seeing, like you mentioned, more moderates taking the position of, wait a second, I've been standing idle for too long. We need to do something about this because now there is the threat of my daughter having to not only share a sports team with biological males, but also share a locker room with biological males. We are seeing some movement in a lot of people last year versus, well, I guess 2023 versus 2024, because you even had this to say. The last time my bill, the Protecting Women and Girls in Sports Act, came to the floor, not a single Democrat supported it. Biden threatened to veto and Schumer let it die in the Senate. But now common sense is back in charge. With the soon-to-be Republican trifecta, my bill reflects a mandate from the American people. No men in women's sports. So first and foremost, what is the timetable on this bill? When can we expect to see it move on to the Senate and hopefully become something that is commonplace in American society?
Yeah, so as you said, it passed the House this week. Senator Thune has already put the pieces in place to be able to hear it on the Senate side very shortly. I don't know the time frame in the Senate. My guess would be in the next 100 days. Because the Senate is very concentrated right now on confirming all of President Trump's nominees. So they obviously have to get that work done first. But I think this will be one of those bills that they consider very early on. The challenge is the filibuster rule in the Senate requires 60 votes. So 7 Democrats are going to have to vote for this. I don't know if that will happen. But the great thing about this is Senator Thune's actually going to bring it up for a vote and put every single senator in the country on the board as to where they stand in women's sports. And in 2026, in these swing states where some of these senators may be up for re-election, that's going to be a tough vote for them to take. Because as you said, and as polls show, this is an 80% issue. And I believe that one of the reasons why President Trump won, and a lot of my colleagues won, is because of this issue, because Republicans are standing with women, protecting Title IX and standing with women's sports, and Democrats think that biological men should be competing with women. And it's a big issue. You go into locker rooms in high schools and middle schools. I've had parents come up to me and say, thank you so much for doing that. My daughter's only in high school, but I don't want her competing with boys. It's an 80% issue across America, and I think it's going to continue to do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think post-election, you had a lot of reflection based on maybe what were the primary issues that helped, the Democrats to lose in the incredible fashion that they did. One of them being the stance on transgender issues. I mean, you even had Seth Moulton come out who said that he realized that his party's messaging on the transgender rights was one of the main issues that probably caused Kamala Harris to be so unpopular among the American population. Talk to me about the shift. Listen, I love the idea of we'll call it shaming because it is what it is. Like, I mean, if you're ashamed of your stance on the issues that you're voting on, then maybe you should change it. Or if you're just trying to hide from the public about how you really feel, now it's an opportunity for the Republican Party to really show, okay, these are the people that don't want to protect women as far as their sports leagues go and inside of their locker rooms and otherwise. Talk to me about the shift that we're seeing in this country, because the board is one thing, but are we going to see more Democrats? Because right now you seem a little hesitant to say we need 7 Democrats to really step up and vote in favor of this. Is there a possibility that we might just see overwhelming is probably too much, but a lot more Democrats than you think feasible right now to step up and vote in favor of this bill in the Senate?
I actually thought there'd have been more than 2 that voted in the House. We only had 2. Seth Moulton wasn't one of those. And then we had a guy vote present because he was too afraid to vote yes and too afraid to vote no as a Democrat in a tough seat. So I think what's great is we're going to know where these individual senators are. The problem is they're afraid of their left flank. If you're a Democratic senator, you're afraid of your progressive left radical wing of your party. And so they're afraid that if they vote for a common sense bill like mine, that they're going to have some progressive far left radical Democrat run against them in a primary in their next race. That's why a lot of the members on the House, Democratic members on the House, voted against it. I can guarantee you, is they're afraid of their left flank. They got to get through a primary before they're in a general election. So that's going to be part of that. But a part of this that we haven't talked about is President Trump. And he's going to be able to do things through executive order to be able to right all of the wrongs of the Biden administration on this issue and many others. But so that will also have an influence on Title IX, universities, and the NCAA.
Yeah. So what do you imagine the changes that we're going to see as a result of Trump being able to use that executive order power? What changes do you see prompted shortly after he takes office on Monday?
So Congress appropriates the money. The executive branch distributes that money. They're in charge of the money once we appropriate it. If I was the president, I wouldn't be shocked if he does this. He could simply do an executive order that any university that allows biological men to compete in women's sports, you lose your federal funding through the Department of Education. You do that, and I can guarantee you very quickly the behavior is going to change at Harvard and some of these other leftist woke schools that think this is appropriate behavior for their collegiate athletics. And then the thing we do have to get done is this bill, because then it puts it in law. It's now in law and you can't do it. So a future administration couldn't come back and undo Trump's executive order. So I would not be surprised that Trump's going to do executive orders on this issue, not just in athletics, but in the military and some other things that we've seen. Mm-hmm. He'll have the ability to do that, but Congress still has to pass this so that it's law and future administrations can't go against women's sports.
So let's discuss the difference, because I know you also are teaming up with Marsha Blackburn to fight to get the NCAA to revoke their transgender policy in women's sports. The difference here being that, unlike the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, this resolution would directly address the issue of trans inclusion at the college level, and it would also affect schools that aren't federally funded, like private institutions. So when you mention, Harvard and those schools changing their ways, those are private institutions, so they wouldn't fall under the Protection of Women and Girls Sports Act. Is that correct? This is a separate bill that would target schools such as the Ivy Leagues?
Yeah, so I'm working with Senator Blackburn on a resolution specifically to the NCAA, because they have a trans policy that allows biological men to compete with women in the NCAA. Obviously, each school has the ability to make those own determinations for themselves, but the NCAA has that policy. So this is a resolution. I imagine it'll pass the House again. Again, the question mark's going to be the Senate, because you need 60 votes on a filibuster over there. But this is sending a very strong signal to the NCAA that their policy as it relates to biological men is not appropriate for women's sports, and it's overwhelmingly pushed against by Congress, by the House, and by the American people. So hopefully we'll get that done soon in the next month or so and send that to them. But if you're at the NCAA, you've got to know that this is coming. They're seeing that we're filing this bill. They saw that we just passed the House bill. I would not be shocked if Trump does something as it relates to an executive order. They see the direction that America is going, and America has rejected the far left position that biological men can compete in women's sports.
Well, yeah, and it's also really embarrassing, too, that the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, who at one point, touted himself as a Republican politician, can't even take a strong stance on keeping transgenders out of women's sports. You would think he would have a little bit more influence in that realm, and he's not been doing his part to help women at all. So, yes, hopefully all of the common sense is instilled back into this country, at least as far as sports is going. I was an athlete growing up, and I can't even imagine having to have go through this madness. I'm very thankful I didn't have to, but I'm very sorry for the generation that's currently experiencing this, because we've seen all types of stories come out, San Jose State University being one of them recently, where you had a whole bunch of turmoil all season long that team experienced as a result of having a transgender on their team, that unfortunately their feelings were taken much more into account than the actual women on that team.
Yep,
moving on to something else that is sweeping the nation right now is, like you mentioned, all of the confirmations taking place in the Senate. We saw Pete Hegseth this week on Capitol Hill. So many people in favor, a lot of veterans, even currently deployed, current military members, marching in support in D.C. in favor of Pete Hegseth getting the confirmation and everything moving forward in a smooth manner. As an Iraq War combat veteran, how excited are you to see Pete Hegseth in the position that he's in? And, also on the other hand, how does it make you feel to see the type of pushback that he's been getting since he was nominated?
Yeah, I support him 100%. I think he'll do a great job. It's good to have somebody that's not a general or somebody that's grown up in the Pentagon that's going to be making our policy. We have an outsider who's served our country, who's deployed in service of our nation, which I think should absolutely be a requirement to serve in that capacity. There was actually Biden's Secretary of the Army never even put on a uniform and served our country. So to have somebody with combat experience that obviously has conservative positions that he has, that's going to fulfill Trump's agenda as it relates to the military and bring our military force back to what it should be, and that is fighting our nation's wars and defending our countries, and not worried about taking pronouns out of Army regulations, and that climate change is the number one national security threat to our nation, refocusing as war fighters and focusing on the defense of our nation. I'm very happy to see him. And it looks like, a lot of that opposition that he was getting initially is starting to fade away because he did such a great job at the hearing.
He did a fantastic job at the hearing. And in fact, there was one moment of lightness during that hearing that I want us to take a look back at. Watch.
Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are two genders.
I know that well. I'm a she-he, so I'm on board.
I mean, wokeness has really permeated our society in so many different ways, including the military. How nice is it that finally there are some moments of lightness, of brevity that are allowed to be had, and people actually laugh at things now?
Yeah. Well, what was funny is right after that, he asked Pete Hegseth how many push-ups he can do. If I was Pete, I would have challenged the senator to a push-off competition right there on the floor. That would have made national news, and it would have made all the war fighters in the room very proud of their soon-to-be defense secretary, that he's actually physically fit to also represent and lead from the front, as you should in the military, and show the war fighters that you got a leader in place that also is physically fit and combat ready. So it's good to have that lightheartedness. Obviously, the Democrats will do nothing but attack Trump's nominees in every way, shape, or fashion. But I'm looking forward to a complete reversal of the policies that we've seen at DOD.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I have seen up close and personal Pete Hegseth's physical fitness because I guess at this point it was over a year ago. I had to report on, it was, they had to swim the Hudson. Like, they had to swim miles through the Hudson River, then get up on these massive barges, do pull-ups, do push-ups. It was Will Cain and Pete Hegseth. So, Congressman, I was right there. We have an incredibly fit man in Pete Hegseth who not only physically fit, but also, like you've mentioned, mentally, emotionally, all of the other capabilities he also possesses. He is fit in as well. The last thing I want to get to you with is obviously Monday is a massive day for our country. We've got the inauguration, but also we have the college football national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Something that I think is really impressive was how much Republicans were able to resonate with sports fans over the course of the election cycle. It was really a space that they were embraced in, and especially you saw that to be the case in college football. What do you attribute that successful connection to?
Yeah, it's just being common sense and being like the majority of the American people. Trump would come into a college stadium and the whole stadium would go nuts. He'd go to an MMA fight and the whole stadium would go nuts. It just shows you how much mainstream America supports the president and supports Republicans' agenda, because we stand for the working class people and we stand for what America stands for. And President Trump epitomizes that in every way, shape, or fashion. And I'm very much, having been in Congress for 6 years, this is my 4th term. This is the first time that I'll have the opportunity to be in a Republican House or Republican Senate and President Trump in the White House. I'm very excited about the opportunities for our country, and those fans in those stadiums can feel that as well.
Who's your pick for the big game? Are you taking a side?
I'm a Florida Gator, so there's not even an SEC team in the game. So I'm not, unlike J.D. Vance, I'm not going to be looking down during the inaugural gala at my phone to see what the score is. But unfortunately, the Gators didn't do that well this year, and there's not even an SEC team in the final that I can root for. But he does have the ability. He's got Air Force too, so I would not be shocked if after the inauguration he hops on Air Force 2 and gets down there for part of the game.
I think there's a lot of people that would support that. I mean, J.D. Vance, we have already seen evidence that he is so real. He is not putting on a show. This is not a charade. So if he does, in fact, jump on that jet and fly to the game, I think a lot of people might just respect it. So we'll see what happens. But Monday, obviously a big day for several reasons. And Congressman, I'm just so thankful that you've taken a little bit of time ahead of such a monumental day to come on and share your insight. And I hope to be able to have a conversation with you again soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, anytime. Great to see you.